screen?
Sounds good.
Host disabled participant screen sharing. That wasn't very nice of you.
Let me see here.
I shouldn't have said on the recording, that on your recording. Do you want to start it over?
It's okay.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
There you go. You should have it now.
Ah, there we go.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have Jerry Walter with us, and Jerry brings, Jerry is the president. For those of you who don't know, he's the president of the NFDF, which is the National Fabry Disease Foundation. Jerry is a good friend of mine, but he also, we asked Jerry to join us for Cardiac Month, because he has a story that is, there's so much to it, as you'll see. And also he brings education with the story as well. So Jerry, thank you for being open. And I know you have camp coming up for NFDF, and it's a very busy time for you. So thanks for being open and for sharing this with us. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
It is a very busy time for me, but I'm happy to be here with you. And yes, I do have a story. I always have a story, don't I?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Let me figure out how I'm going to operate these slides. Okay, this is just a part of my story. So like, what's going on here? I have a very fuzzy screen. So like many of you, my cardiac issues are just a rather big part of my story, but not my whole story. So I titled this slide presentation "A Part of My Story." So I just have to figure out why I'm not advancing. There we go. So this is much more information than you can read, digest, probably not comprehend, but it's not meant to make you dizzy or anything, but it's just a big overview of my life, really. And I'm wearing my, so I decided, I'm casual today, but I decided to wear my I Define Me t-shirt for the occasion. As you can see on the left, I've had this t-shirt quite a while. It's been one of our theme t-shirts with the National Fabry Disease Foundation. So I don't want to really go through much of this. I've done a lot of things in work, in life. I've done had a lot of adventurous things, but what I want, and that's what I wanted to highlight on this slide, is that when I was diagnosed with Fabry disease at 25 years old, and the first statistic that I ever heard was the average age of death of an untreated male was only 41 years old. And I was in the military in the United States Air Force in the Netherlands at the time. And I thought to myself that, well, if that's bad news first, but if I'm only going to live till I'm 41, then I have to get busy. I have to do some things in my life that make it more meaningful. And so that little section down there where I've bracketed, I started doing things that I might not have a chance to do if I waited. So I became a skydiver and a scuba snow skier, and I traveled the world.
A judge would change the full count.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. So anyway, I traveled, and the one thing that didn't happen is I didn't pass away at 41. And so I was lucky enough to have some really good things in my life at an early age that a lot of people don't experience until later in life. And it's made a world of difference to me. I changed my goals when I was 25, and my long-term goals became my short-term goals, because, if I was going to live a short life, then I had to move some things up a little bit. And so I'll just move on, and that's kind of the basis of not why I did all the things I did or have done what I've done in my life, but a good part of it knowing that ended up to have an upside in that I've led a very, very good, adventurous, fulfilling life. So this is my family. I don't really know the exact number of people in my family that are currently diagnosed, but we're at least up to 23. And I think some of my relatives, kids and grandkids, I'm not really aware of and keeping up with as much. But at this point, there are 23 that I know about. And it started with my grandmother, who passed it to my mother and a couple of her siblings. And the other siblings had fairly large families also. And my mother was diagnosed through the corneal whirling in her eyes. When she made a visit to a hospital for something completely unrelated, and the physician noticed that her eyes were bulging. Well, bulging eyes is not a symptom of Fabry disease, but it led that physician to diagnose her. So here's our ragtag family, and so the three on the right on the bottom have all passed away before treatment was available. Well, one was getting treatment. In fact, I'm sorry, I better back up a little bit. Two were good. Yeah, I got confused there for a second. I should read my own slide. So two on the bottom, the second from the left and last on the left have passed away, and at a pretty young age. And then three other family members not shown here also passed away in that age time frame. And my mother also has passed away now. So I am the only one on the top row that has Fabry. And of course, my sister and my brother Tom are still here, and they're doing quite well. So as a 60, you know that I'm a male, but I'm going to say it up here. As a 67-year-old male with classic Fabry disease, only to distinguish between some of the differences between males and females with our disease. So as you would expect for a male with classic disease, males are almost certain to have most or all of the possible symptoms, whereas females and people with later onset disease have a much more varied symptomology. And of course, females can range anywhere from asymptomatic to all the severe symptoms that just like a male with classic. So, but it varies so much more. And then of course, later onset disease, in theory, people are not going to have all the leading symptoms as a child, but your disease may still progress to heart failure and kidney failure, heart disease and kidney disease. But we hear a lot of exceptions to that theory. So we just manage our disease as it comes. But these are just some of the pictures of my, those are my personal angiokeratoma and my big fat swollen foot. It doesn't look like that now, but I'll talk about that later. And of course, we have other things along the way that are not related to Fabry. And in my journey on the bottom, this is a photo of my surgery from a mastectomy and craniotomy when I had bacterial meningitis. So we kind of throw things along the way in our experience that even add more to our journeys. So, and all those things that are listed there is just all things that you all know about and you experience and many of you experience. So I'm going to come back to this, but I would like to say that my low for my kidney disease was stage 3B, and my lung function got as low as 50%. And so I'll tell you about what it is now a little bit later. This is another very busy slide that I won't go into too much detail, but I put my journey on a slide, and just it goes from when I started, when I learned I had Fabry disease in 1979, all the way through 2020 when I had my heart transplant. And there's lots of steps along the way, and including some of the things, again, unrelated to Fabry disease. But it's been a long road. I'm going to focus on my cardiac, the things that I've experienced with my heart more than any of this. But I think this slide's been being passed around for years, so you may have seen it. But, you know, along with having Fabry, I've had a lot of life-threatening events or experiences. So I had life-threatening bacterial meningitis, and they told my wife I was unlikely to live through the night. I had Guillain-Barré, which is often life-threatening. I had a second life-threatening bacterial infection a year after the first one. I was in the Pentagon on 9/11, and some of the aircraft landed 75 feet from my decks, 2 floors down. And I remember, I think about when my first life-threatening event was when I was a kid, when I was 17. And I caught a ride home from school with a friend of mine and another friend in his car. And we were going down the road from the school, and there's a 2-lane road, and all the school buses get in the right and all the other traffic gets in the left. And we were going down this road, and it's heading toward a divided highway with 2 lanes on one side, a ditch, and 2 lanes on the other. Well, we're speeding down that road, and my friend's lost his brakes in his car. And so we barreled across those 4 lanes, and I don't know how close, but very close to where we crossed, a loaded dump truck was coming down the road. And a few seconds later, and it would have crashed into us and killed us all, no doubt. But we went across all 4 lanes and landed and went into a little field on the other side. And I look at that as my first life-threatening experience. And luckily I got through that and many more after that. So let me just move on to my next slide. So when I said that I became adventurous, this is kind of some of the stuff I'm talking about. It inspired me to leave the military. I had already spent 7 years in the military, 7 years in the military, and only visited 7 countries because I was a lower grade enlisted airman at the time, and I went to places I could drive to. And so I went mostly, I took a ferry in, but I went to 7 countries in 7 years and hit, you know, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and a few other countries. And then I got out of the military and I took a job in Saudi Arabia for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft, the defense contractor. And during that time, I really expanded my world travel. So I went to another 18 countries to add to the places I'd already been, and did a lot of things that were really just awesome. I've had such a fulfilling life in many ways, and these are just some of my photos that I'm sorry if you can hear my little beagle barking at a squirrel or something. I will, if she gets too annoying, I'll go and talk to her. But these are just some of the adventures I've had in it, and it's just really been great. And I'll talk about this later. I had a time in my life where my symptoms were so bad, which is one of the reasons that I was able to do a lot of these things. And the other reasons were just plain stubbornness. So in 1979 is when I had my first episode of an irregular heartbeat. And so I was at a National Guard weekend, sorry, 1 second. Well, it's not gonna help. Sorry, she'll just start doing it again. So we'll just try and bear through it. So I was at a weekend training event with the Army National Guard in Michigan. And I was driving home from the weekend in a snowstorm. And I had been up late the night before. So, you know, we'd been out and had a few beers and stayed up late. And I drove home when it was over. And I started to have, I started to feel something in my chest. Excuse me one second. I'm sorry to do this. We can cut this out of the video. I apologize for that. I brought her in here with me, so hopefully she won't be noisy.
No problem.
Okay, so her name's Molly, by the way. So I started feeling something in my chest, and I kind of felt like my heart, but I really wasn't sure. And I felt maybe, well, it's just something in the car that's vibrating up through the car. And I decided after a little while to stop on the side of the road, actually stop at a McDonald's restaurant and just sit there quietly for a little bit until I decided that, yes, it was my heart, and which I wasn't uncomfortable with. But I went ahead and finished the drive. It was a 2-hour drive, and I drove straight to the emergency room where I lived. And by the time I got in the emergency room, just the irregular heartbeat stopped. So I'm there, and everything's calmed down. But the visits I had after that, the doctor decided that it's what he called holiday heart, from staying up late, having a few beers, driving in a snowstorm. He decided it was just stress and being tired that led to that. So a number of years after that, so when I really started having more significant issues, over time, over years, I had a lot of irregular heartbeats, but I was in the military and I downplayed them. I didn't bring any attention to myself because I wanted to get enough time in the military to get promoted. I wanted, I had my long-term goal that became a short-term goal, or the other way around, short-term goal that became a long-term goal, was to get promoted to a colonel in the Army and lock in my retirement. You have to have 20 years to fully retire, and I wasn't there yet. And they have what they call an 18-year lock-in. So I was trying to hold off bringing any attention to myself until I got those two things done, which I did. And then when I saw my cardiologist, this is many years after my first episode, in 2002, he determined that I didn't need a pacemaker or a defibrillator. And so if you look at the slides on the bottom, and one isn't showing for some reason, but this is the progression from when I was 48 years old. I was in the clinical trial for Fabrazyme, and I was in the clinical trial. So when I went into the clinical trial, I finally had to start telling the military more about my situation. But they did scans, and they didn't find any reason that they didn't see the arrhythmias, and they didn't see any reason why I needed a pacemaker or a defibrillator, an ICD. And so these are the scans over time. And the last one, I don't know why it's, oh, there we are. So the last one, you can see the difference in the lipid accumulation or scar tissue. I don't think physicians really, or researchers, physicians really know which one it is, either the accumulation of the scar tissue from it that builds up in the left ventricle wall of our hearts. You hear about, many, if not most of us, have left ventricular hypertrophy, and this is what they're talking about: the enlargement, the thickening in the left ventral wall of the heart, and the progression of damage. So over time, and when I got my first ICD, pacemaker defibrillator, in 2007, that stopped me from having MRIs for a very long time, until I finally had to until something significant happened down the road, which led to my, part of what led to my heart transplant. And I got a conditional MRI because the situation was so dire. And this is what it looked like. So I thought being on treatment, enzyme replacement therapy all those years would have not allowed this to happen to the extent that it happened. So I credit with enzyme replacement therapy for keeping me upright all these years. I think it definitely slowed down the progression in my heart and my kidneys and my lungs, but it still progressed over time. So I went from, minimal, they didn't even think I needed the pacemaker defibrillator to this situation where I was in heart failure. And so it's just, and even back here, we did a Holter monitor, but I think I've decided, and in talking to many cardiologists and people, that the Holter monitor doesn't always tell us what's happening, because in the beginning, a lot of your arrhythmias, your regular heartbeats, are happening infrequently, but they're happening. And so when we got to this stage, even in 2007, when I had the first ICD put in, I was having arrhythmias all the time. We just didn't know it. So let me go to the next slide. So from that point, when things really heated up in 2011 or 2007 rather, I was due to retire from the military the next day. And the only thing I had to do was, I'd already moved to North Carolina where my home is, and I needed to go back to Northern Virginia to officially retire from the military after 27 years of active duty. And I got to the airport in Northern Virginia, and on the plane, I didn't feel right. Something was wrong, but I managed to get my rental car and drove straight to the local clinic. I didn't get to the emergency room right away, but went to the clinic first. And I went in the door and I said, "You should probably write down my wife's phone number." And they said, "Well, let's get your vitals and see what's going on, and we'll go from there." And I said, "No, I really think you should take my wife's phone number down." And shortly after that, I went into a coma. And I was diagnosed with bacterial meningitis. And the doctors told my wife that I probably wouldn't live through the night. Well, Angela, being the tenacious, smart individual she is, she got me out of that hospital and took me up to the military hospital at Walter Reed. And they did some different things, and they, managed to keep me alive, and things started to get better. But all total, I spent between the first hospitalization with meningitis and following, I had, during that episode, I had Guillain-Barré syndrome, which I think researchers think that happens more to people that are on these really heavy antibiotics, which I was, which were needed to keep my, get the meningitis under control. And so I ended up with Guillain-Barré, which can also be life-threatening, but luckily it didn't get into my lungs. It paralyzed something in my throat for a little while, and my legs were, I could hardly move my legs, but I recovered fully from that. Hello, come here. This is going to be a good recording, Julia, me and my dog. I don't have any place to put her though. So, and then at the same time, they decided the cause of my meningitis was because I had a hole in the protective covering of the brain, the dura, that we didn't know about. And I don't know if I'd had it all my life or not, but I had it. And my granddaughter had just visited, and she had strep throat. And they think that that's how the strep got into my brain. And so during that, they had to repair the hole in the dura. And that required a craniotomy and a mastectomy on one, mastoidectomy, careful, mastoidectomy on one side and a mastoidectomy on the other. And so that, that ended my scuba diving days and my skydiving days, but I recovered from all that, and that's okay. I had the experiences. And so I went straight from Walter Reed down to, I was going home, and I went into the hospital as soon as I got there. I had to flare up, and I went right back in the hospital into UNC for a total of 60 days in the hospital over those events. So a year later, I recovered from those pretty well. It takes a long time to recover from the meningitis, but for the most part, my mind wasn't right for a long time. I couldn't do math in my head. I couldn't remember a lot of things. It took a very long time for me to recover from that. But I was well on my way to recovery a year later, and I had a second life-threatening bacterial infection, and which also I spent some time in the hospital after that, but it cleared up. So, and then over time, all of these are the things that I experienced and many people experience. We have ablation therapy where you can go in and laser a little part in your heart off to keep it from doing what it's to help it do what it's supposed to do. I had cardioversion where my heart was in a sustained irregular beat that I wouldn't come out of, and what they actually do is stop your heart for a few seconds and let your body restart your heart, which is a scary idea, but it worked. And so, going into that room where they're going to zap my heart to stop it, and then hopefully let my body restart it on its own, which it did. So it was uneventful thinking about afterwards, but leading up to it was a little bit scary. And the whole procedure only took 10 minutes, which was amazing. They can put you out with medication that allows you to go sleep for 10 minutes and wake right up like it never happened, which is truly amazing. I had a mitral valve repair after that because the valve was leaking. You can see those, I'll explain those photos at the bottom. My mitral valve was leaking to where by the time we discovered it, the valve surgeon said if I didn't do that within a couple more weeks, it wouldn't have been possible. They would have had to replace the valve. So again, I was very fortunate to get that fixed just in time. And I was not worried about that surgery because it's called a non-invasive surgery. Well, that's a misnomer. I had my mitral valve surgery came with a lot more pain than my heart transplant, because when you have heart transplant, they cut all the nerves around your heart, and I hardly had any pain at all throughout the whole time. But the mitral valve repair, I had many incisions in different places, and as they scoped around my heart, and so the bottom picture here, this is you never know what this is unless I told you. In fact, it looks like some little kind of goblin thing with a straw, but you never know this was my heart. But this is the way it looked when it was leaking, and this is after you can see the staples that they used to close it up. And so it was a very successful repair, and I was happy with that. And then over time, I became officially diagnosed with heart failure. And when a physician tells you you're in heart failure, that's really shocking, because in my imagination, I think of, if you have kidney failure, your kidneys are one or both are done. And if you have heart failure, that's sort of the same line of thinking I had, that when you have heart failure, you're not going to last for much longer, and which is true, but the much longer is not what you expect. You can be in progressive heart failure for a very long time before you actually need to have a heart transplant. So that was good news to me. So I was officially diagnosed with heart failure for quite a long time before I needed a heart transplant. So this is a slide that I made a few years ago. And the reason I made it is because while we're going through all these things with heart disease and kidney disease and lung disease and all of the things, and lots of medications for proteinuria and for beta blockers to keep your heart rhythm stable, and all of these things. It's hard to figure out. Excuse me. It's not making that noise. I didn't realize Angela was also had something somewhere she had to be tonight. That's why we're in this position. So as we were trying to figure out, I got to the point where I couldn't walk across a room, go out to my car carrying a bag of groceries or carrying anything. And it just brought me to my knees. I got so out of breath and so tired and so weak that I thought, this is it. I mean, this is the beginning of the end. And you try to figure out what's really causing this. So is it your heart? Is it your kidneys? Kidneys is not likely to cause it, but it could be medication for kidneys. Is it your lungs? You know, my lung function went down to 50%. What things are going on in your body that are causing? Is it not enough sleep, which I frequently don't get enough sleep because I'm always thinking. I'm thinking too much about life and work, and you know, I'm in here at 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes when I can't sleep, and I'm working to get things done because I always have a pretty busy schedule. And is it stress and anxiety? Is it sedentary lifestyle? When all those things are happening to you, you know, we do a lot of sitting, and sitting's not good for us. Walking is good for us if you can walk. And so it might be other kinds of infections. And what we learned at one point in my journey is that some of the medications I was taking, my beta blocker for my heart rhythm, became toxic to me. And I had a suspicion that, and I'd done some reading and I heard about this happening to others, and I had a suspicion that my beta blocker might be part of the reason. So I went to my cardiologist and I said, can you put me on a different beta blocker? And he adamantly said, that's not causing it, and I don't want to change your beta blocker. So I did what I shouldn't do. I took myself off the beta blocker, and within a week, my symptoms improved significantly. Now that was risky, and I shouldn't have done that, but well, in this case, I should have, because we did some testing in the pathway that beta blockers metabolize, and determined that I'm a moderate metabolizer. It wasn't poor, but it was enough to make that medication toxic to me. And so I had taken it for about 3 years before this happened. And then all of a sudden it happened. So after I discovered this, I got on a new beta blocker. It lasted about 2.5 years, and the same thing happened. So medications themselves can cause some of the things that we think Fabry disease is causing. And it's just so hard to figure out which one of the things that are going on in our lives is causing it. Fatigue and the weakness and the lack of energy and shortness of breath. And they may all contribute, but in this case, my medication had a significant impact on the way I felt. And so I learned a lot from that. And over time, of course, my heart and lungs took over, and I continue to get worse, but not as rapidly as I had been. So the process of getting a heart transplant, when it was time to get one, started with me at the recommendation of my electrophysiologist to get connected to the Duke Heart Transplant Center, and which I did. And I was scheduled for a week-long full workup with them, where so many tests every day for a week. You're doing something, and so many tests and evaluations and laboratory tests that, but it did a couple of things. It got me acquainted with the team, and we learned a lot. We learned about where I stood about getting a transplant, and it wasn't time for me. I wouldn't score high enough on a transplant list to ever get a heart in that near future. So a year later, I did the same evaluation, and I was still not ready. In 2020, when I did the evaluation, my situation was much different. And so he and my doctor said that, I think you're ready. You tell me when you're ready. I'd gotten to that point where I just couldn't function any longer. And I didn't feel like I was ready because I had to get ready for camp, and we had to get through camp and the conference, and I had to buy plane tickets, and I had to do all these things. And so I wasn't ready. But he brought me in for an evaluation called a cardiac catheterization stress test. And when I did that test, they learned that it was time. I had to come in. And they asked me to come in until I got a heart. And how they made that decision was through this cardiac catheterization stress test. And what happens is you're on the table pedaling, and they're watching what's happening. And the harder I pedaled, my heart didn't respond. It wasn't giving me any more blood and oxygen, no matter how hard I worked. And so that was the turning point. And they repeated the test a few days later, and the same, in fact, they said that was the worst cardiac catheterization stress test that they had seen, where a person was still walking around. And so that did it. I didn't have a choice anymore. I went into the hospital. I was put on, I don't even remember what it's called now, but I was put on a device that helped my heart function while I was waiting for the transplant. And I had to stay almost flat on the table for a couple of weeks until it was time. And so, but it all came together. And I got the news of a heart. The first one that I was called on to, that I was getting a heart, turned out that they found a problem with the heart midair while they were bringing it in. And, I ended up going back to my room, disappointed, of course. But a few days later, I had another opportunity, and I got a heart transplant, and I got a great heart. And so it's just, it's a new world for me, a new life. And, so now I'll tell you the rest about my kidney function and my heart, or in my lung function. So it's been 2 years now, and I still, I don't have any issues with my heart. My body is doing great. My health is doing great. The issues I deal with now are overcoming some of that, getting back to normal in terms of being sedentary for so long and having back issues and ankle issues and various other things that slow me down a little bit, but I'm in physical therapy working through those. So all in all, I'm doing great. So my kidneys, after 2 years, my kidneys took an initial drop after the surgery, and that's normal. They took a pretty big hit. And then over 2 years, my kidneys are finally back from chronic kidney disease stage 3 to chronic kidney disease stage 2. And so, people have asked the question, I see all the comments on questions on the Facebook pages, and, I never knew the answer to that, but now I do, that your kidneys can recover. Everyone's different, but in my case, my kidneys are better than they have been in 20 years. So that's pretty amazing. My lung function was down to less than 50% function. And in my last pulmonology visit, my lung function, according to the lung function test, the spirometry that we take, is normal. So just an amazing difference in getting more blood and more oxygen to your body that just recovered so well. And other things. Other things have gotten a little bit better, but they already were improving with enzyme replacement therapy, like the chronic edema in my lower legs. And you saw that picture of my legs. If I get 8 hours or if I get 6 hours sleep a night, the edema goes away in my legs. and it'll, I wear compression socks all the time, and except at night, it'll come back to some extent during the day, but every night it goes away. And it's even coming back less and less. And I think I attribute that to my heart transplant also. I had already done pretty well with the enzyme replacement therapy in reducing my traumatic edema from the picture I showed you to when I went in for the heart transplant, but it's helped even more. So I once in the hospital, once I got my transplant, I walked out the door in 8 days. And in the hospital, it was a ward that goes sort of in a triangle. And I had to walk every day as part of my therapy to get out of there. And so I think the second night I was there, I walked a mile inside the ward and continued to do that until my 8th day when I was released from the hospital. And so, it's just, my life has changed. I have a new life. I'm healthier. I have more energy. I'm able to keep doing what I do, what I love to do. I'm at retirement age, but I don't want to retire. I enjoy what I do with the National Fabry Disease Foundation. I enjoy sharing with other people what I've learned through my experiences and doing what we can. You probably may know this already, but I've made it my personal mission to help educate the Fabry community, or at least help translate some of what we see in literature into terms that we can all understand a little easier. And it hasn't been an easy journey for me. When I read medical literature articles, I don't do it with a physical dictionary, but I do it with the internet. I look up half the words I read until to where I've gotten to have a very good understanding of most of what's going on with us. And I'm still not, the medical literature still can confuse me a great deal in the terminology, and so many things have many terms they can use to describe one thing. And that just complicates our understanding of medical terms and what's going on even more. And Fabry disease being the very complicated disease that it is, that there's so much going on that it takes a long time to really get a grasp. And the reason it's important is it's helped me with my own health. Understanding the terminology and what's going on helps us ask better questions to our doctors, helps us do more of the right things. And it's helpful for us to share with others. I'm going to go to the next slide. And I guess I don't know if it's on, I don't think I put it on the next slide. But what I've learned through all the things I've been through and things that I've not been good at over from one time to another is there's some essential ingredients to being healthy. And they're what you hear all the time. And that's walking, exercise. You need exercise. And I know that from my own experience that things are, as we get older, we don't function as well. Our bones get creaky. We get, we have all sorts of things that go wrong. And the more we keep active and at least walking, if not other things, and exercising is really good for us. And it's making the most difference in my health right now, along with all the other things that I'm doing, is getting exercise, walking. And if you can't do one thing, do something else. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, bike. If you can't bike, find a thing that you can do that will help you stay healthy. And then we have all the other things like a healthy diet. And, I read things like there's a lot of articles that say what's good for your brain is what's good for your heart, or vice versa, is good for your brain, or vice versa. And it's a huge factor in diet and exercise and not smoking and managing your blood pressure and managing your weight to staying healthy. And it's all sort of linked. And if you don't do those essential things, it's going to be harder. So that's my pitch about do everything. Oh, and the other essential ingredients for people with Fabry are, if you're eligible for treatment and getting treatment, I mean, or if you're eligible, get treatment and stay on treatment. When I talk about treatment, I'm talking about Fabry specific treatment, like enzyme replacement therapy or chaperone therapy. And then there are adjunctive therapies like managing your protein or your albumin with ACEs and ARBs to lower those in your body, and other things that just do everything. If you can't do something the way that other people do it, find a way to figure it out. Find something you can do to have the same effect on you. So that is my pitch, I think. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you so much, Jerry. For those of you who have questions, you can just unmute and then feel free to ask the question or show your video. Either one is fine, or you can always chat it in the bottom. On the bottom, there's a chat button. You can do that as well.
And if you don't have questions, that's okay too. I'm not sure that I could answer all your individual questions anyway. I just, I hope that people are able to get something out of my experience. And I know that many of you have your own long experiences and lots of things you've had to deal with. So I appreciate you being here tonight. Darren, it's nice to see you. It's been a long time.
It's nice to see you as well, Jerry. Said I'll say that I would agree with all the positive things you were saying, and you're certainly, it's wonderful to see that you've survived all these things, and you've an example of sort of that positive attitude that I think is so important to dealing with this condition.
Well,
So thank you.
Someone asked me where I get my optimism. And I said, it just comes naturally. I can't be a pessimist. I mean, pessimism is good in a lot of ways. You question things, but I'm just a natural optimist. I can't help it. So I'm luckier than a lot of people, and that it's just who I am. And you know, some people find a hard time finding the upside. And I think that I'm more fortunate because I don't have to work at it. But I applaud you that being optimistic doesn't come natural to you. But I think our future, and especially the future of our children and grandchildren, is much brighter than it was in the past.
Oh, absolutely agree.
Yes. Thank you.
Great simple line from a book I read, The Art of Happiness, Dalai Lama, and this other fellow, I can't remember his name, but be optimistic. It feels better.
Right.
Nice and simple.
Right. It makes it easier for us.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if there's no questions, and
Hi, Donna.
we know, Jerry, I have your email, so I can always email you questions if anybody has some or wants to connect. But thank you for your time tonight. Incredible story, you know, I think, and it's, you know, I think there's just so many parts of your story that have different education points. So thank you so much for hitting those tonight and for sharing everything you did.
Thank you, Julia. And it's always a pleasure to see you, and hope we can visit again sometime soon.
Hope so.
And I really apologize about my little beagle. She is she's a fairly new little rescue beagle, and she doesn't like it when her mom's not around. She's being noisy about it. But most of the time she's pretty quiet. It's just,
That's okay.
just like any child.
You're on the
she's
phone.
at the right time.
Yeah.
That's great.
We've all been there, I'm sure, at this point now, if we've been doing this Zoom thing for so long, that we've all had those moments.
Right.
Thank you very much for sharing your story
My pleasure.
and your positive thought.
Yes, thank you very much.
And you're right. Positively is a question of choosing to be positive, to not let go your spirit on a bad mood. You know, like, I don't know, to kick your butt on the back, you know, to make a better choice, to be more, having more happiness, you know? You understand? I'm sorry, my English is
Oh,
I
no,
can
you're fine.
I can understand better now, but I still not talking a lot.
Very well. But I think it's hard for people that aren't natural optimists because your struggle is much harder. You can't just be an optimist because you want to be, you know, if it doesn't come naturally to you, I sympathize with people that, I mean, and a lot of people are not that optimistic because of what's going on with them. Their life is being devastated by our disease for good reason. I've been lucky enough not to have that debilitating pain that many people have. I have pain, but I imagine that many people have much more pain to much greater pain than I ever have. And so I'm fortunate there, but some people, just can't do some of the things that I've figured out a way to do. And it's not their fault. I'm just lucky to have what I have.
But keeping the thought, I was listening a spiritual master, if I can say it like that. And he said, you don't let, I said to many people, okay, I was not alone with many people. He said, it's a question of kind of discipline to not let your spirit going down, It's not an easy thing to do, but you can try to not let your spirit down. That's what he said. And I try on sometimes you have a day, doesn't work that much, blah, blah, blah. But because we have all pain, we have all things to deal with and et cetera, et cetera. But I try to, even I'm usually positive person either. I think you said that here, but when the little moment I have down, I try to manage